This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Welcome to today's meeting of the Housing Committee. Members of the public might like to follow along on @London Assembly on social media and use the hashtag London Housing for this meeting. Please may I remind participants to silence your devices. Our main item of business today is the implementing and monitoring the Renters' Rights Act in London. Before we begin, we have a few short items of business, and I now would like to ask our clerk, Diane Richards, if any apologies have been received.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence have been received today from the Deputy Chair, Assemblymember Moema, for whom Assemblymember Baker is substituting, and from Assemblymember Cooper, for whom Assemblymember McCartney is substituting. And in addition, in accordance with Standing Order 2.4D, with your permission, Assemblymember Lord Bailey is joining the meeting remotely.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, colleagues. We now come to declarations of interest. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if member have any other interests to declare? Great. Item number 3, can I ask the committee to note the outstanding actions arising from its previous meeting? Great. And can I ask the committee to note the action taken by me as chair under delegated authority in consultation with party group lead members, namely to agree the committee's report, the Mayor's Affordable Homes Programme? Both of them. Agreed and noted. So that brings us on to our main item of business, implementing and monitoring the Renters' Rights Act in London. Can I please welcome our first panel of guests into the chamber? So today we have Dr. Jennifer Harris, Head of Policy, Research and Social Impact at the TDS Group. Thank you, joining us in the chamber. And joining us remotely, we've got Professor Christine Whitehead, Emeritus Professor of Housing Economics, London School of Economics and Political Science. So we're going to start the questioning, which starts with me, and then I'll hand over to other Assembly members. So just to kick off, just as a broad question, I'll start with Dr. Jennifer Harris in the chamber. This is just about implementing the Act. So what will be the most significant change for private renters and landlords in London arising from the Renters' Rights Act? Thanks.
So today I'm going to be talking about some findings from research which is funded by the TDS Charitable Foundation. So they do a yearly representative survey both with landlords and tenants. So we now have data from over 10,000 tenants living in the private rented sector across England and over 4,000 landlords. A quarter of each from each group are either living or working in London. Now, in terms of some of the most significant changes, and the one you'll hear about the most often is, of course, the removal of Section 21. In our data, we also did an additional sort of quick survey with 1,000 tenants just a couple of months ago to gauge their sort of awareness and opinions of the Act. And 42% of tenants said that they felt that the removal of Section 21 would make them feel more secure. Now, I think it's important to think about what that word means, feel, because the data actually shows that most tenancies are ended by the tenant rather than the landlord. So the risk of eviction is relatively low, but the fear of eviction is relatively high. And our research shows that that impacts well-being and that impacts tenants' behaviours in the sector. So, for example, a reluctance to report issues to their landlord. 22% of tenants also said the removal of Section 21 would make them more willing to report, to raise a complaint with their council or another redress scheme. And of course, that's one of the main ambitions behind the Act, is empowering tenants to call out poor landlord practice. Now, whether or not tenants actually will be sufficiently empowered, informed and supported to make use of those new kind of powers is something I'd like to speak a bit more about today. There's, of course, many other changes of significance. The second one, which I think is worth highlighting of particular relevance in London, is some of the changes that seek to impact some of the affordability pressures which are faced by tenants, which we know from our research are quite acute in London, with a third struggling to pay their rent each month and nearly 50% cutting back on household essentials in order to pay their rent. So banning rental bidding, for example, that's probably quite significant in London, where 31% our survey shows that occurs at 31% of tenancies as opposed to 21% nationally, so nearly a third of all new tenancies. Similarly, the banning of rent in advance, that's also a key challenge reported by tenants in terms of trying to access the sector. That is in 21% of cases occurring in London as opposed to 17% nationwide. So those are just a few of the challenges that I think are of significance nationally, but particularly in London.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Professor Whitehead, I'm going to bring you in with the same question just about what will be the most significant changes, but it'd be really interesting to get your perspective on how the implementation of the Act will interact with other pressures within the housing system. If you're able to pick that up in your presentation, thank you.
I think the issues are quite strong. Probably most of the people we're talking about, neither side will be taking notice of legislation. There'll be a lot of very poor people who are letting to very poor people. And I've written a number of things on that. But the problem is that I don't think that you can expect to help people who are very poor, who are being helped, who are being accommodated by other very poor people, and that is a significant proportion of the London market. I did write a paper on it about a year ago. I don't know whether I can find it, probably not.
Did you want to expand on that slightly around what you did find within that paper, or just talk us through what you mean and what you found there?
Well, what we found was that, there's a whole set of people who just do what the rules say. They're fine, they're usually relatively well off, and they've got reasonable capacity to pay the rent which has been set. But in parts of London, the vast majority of people who by definition are renting will not have the capacity to address that effectively, and what will be happening is that the rent will be being determined by what can be done, not by the basic legal framework. And we found that on a number of occasions. On the other hand, it's still a lot better than not having it. I'm not trying to get rid of it.
No, but you are explaining how it's going to interact with, the specific context in London. Do you want to speak to how it will interact with things like temporary accommodation and homelessness, as we've obviously seen an increase in the use of temporary accommodation and homelessness in London? It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, that is a very major problem because, it is a significant part of the market, and much more of it in other parts of the country. So it is important. I think I think the distribution of income is what matters. If you're talking about people who are sort of above the top third or top third and above, top 2/3 and below, you are going to get reasonable capacity to implement. But at the bottom end of the market, you've got no capacity to implement at all. So I think it helps an important part of the system, but it's not enough to help the poor, the real poor people, either in terms of providing or in terms of living in.
Thank you. And we've got some follow-up questions later in the meeting around some of the specifics about what could be done to maybe help in those circumstances, but that was really insightful. Just before I move on to colleagues. Dr. Harris, you talked about some of the challenges. I didn't know if there was anything that you wanted to comment on in this opening around things that might be difficult to enforce within, the new Act in London, in like a London context.
I think the enforcement challenges of the Act have been widely reported and discussed. I think it's generally acknowledged that councils lack sufficient resources, staff, skills, sometimes political will, motivation. We've done research whilst I was employed at the University of Bristol, which showed significant variation in councils' approach to regulating the sector, and I don't see that changing under the new Act. Some councils take a very kind of proactive approach, and others take a very light touch and very reactive stance. There's been a lot of discussion regarding councils' capacity to enforce from a kind of enforcement perspective, but something that I think's not been discussed is the extent to which councils will be equipped to support compliance with the law, right? Because often people use the number of civil penalties, prosecutions, or use of other formal powers as a measure of how well the sector is operating. Now, I would say that's an incorrect measure, because what we're essentially trying to achieve is improved standards by compliance with the law, right? Now, when you look at other regulatory contexts and what is effective in encouraging compliance with the law, yes, formal enforcement is incredibly important, and the Act brings all sorts of new powers for councils, but there's been very little discussion about that, the activity which needs to complement that, the advice, the support, the stuff that needs to in order to support landlords who might be unintentionally non-compliant. I don't think that's been discussed very much. I've done research with councils, and they said actually that's one of the key challenges that they face, unintentional non-compliance. We have about a third of landlords in London with one property, so it's slightly lower than the national average. The national average is about 40%, but it's about a third in London have one property. The majority, they manage their properties alongside other forms of employment, and this is what research shows is where the largest proportion of unintentional non-compliance occurs. So yes, criminal activity needs to be tackled through formal enforcement. We also need to think about the capacity of councils and others to tackle the inevitable, I would say, unintentional non-compliance that's going to occur as a result of this Act.
I think unintentional non-compliance is the big issue, and it's because it's really quite expensive to be chasing everybody. It is a major problem.
And I think that leads us on to our next set of questions, which are from Assemblymember McCarthy.
Yes, thank you. And in our previous evidence session, hearing from local authorities, some of those barriers that you've talked about have been evident. It seems to come down to capacity, which is linked obviously to funding, knowledge, because it is quite a technical area, and also perhaps willingness to do it from local authorities. That may be linked to their capacity as well. But can you, particularly on the resources fund and the knowledge, what do you think should happen to bolster that? And is there something that the Mayor should be doing?
I think as a first step, it would be really helpful to have a London-wide assessment of local authority capacity and the resources required to enforce the Act, with sort of clear additional resourcing required identified to cover both this formal enforcement and this kind of compliance-focused activities that I mentioned as well. So I think that's something others have called for. The other is, serious consideration to be given to proposals by other organisations such as the CIEH for ring-fenced funding, if that's something that the Mayor could encourage government to mandate, is that the funding with the new burdens fund is ring-fenced to support enforcement relative to the size, of course, the local PRS, just to reflect differing enforcement burdens and competing political priorities. And then again, I do wonder if there's something that the Mayor could do around supporting best practice, given the variation that exists within local authority activity. Could there be opportunities for kind of sharing best practice and learning from each other?
I'm sure they could.
Sorry, Christine, did you want to come in there?
You said I'm sure there could be exactly that.
Okay, I didn't know whether you wanted to contribute anything additional that's been mentioned already. That's the Christine.
No, I think, I mean, the honest answer is that there are very large numbers of poor people in London who can't afford the sorts of rents which the legal framework brings out. And so you're going to automatically have a significant proportion who are not obeying the rules.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
all I think we can do with that is try to help as much as possible.
Okay. I suppose that leads me on to my next question then. Is that about, you've talked a little, Dr. Harris, about whether we're measuring it in the right way, as in, you know, if there's prosecutions or whatever, and we'll be coming on to that monitoring a little later. But is there sufficient resource or process to actually enable us to have adequate data so that we can do that to start with, and what is needed? Should there be a duty on local authorities to report non-compliance in its different categories to a central body, for example?
I think you'd find a number of local authorities that will be happy to take part in making that work.
Yeah.
And that will give you examples for other people.
Okay, thank
But
you.
I do think what you need is experience and evidence of what happens.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Harris?
So I think the reporting of non-compliance, of course, would be really helpful. I think reporting of enforcement activities and compliance, you know, focused activities and formal activities. And also I think we need to support councils to get to a point where they're measuring and reporting outcomes more, because I think there's a tendency within the sector, again, to report on kind of like the outputs of formal, the outputs of activity. So we have done this many inspections, we've issued this many civil penalties, we've issued this many prosecutions. Do we know that that is effective in encouraging compliance and improving standards with the law? And I think that's something that would be quite good to have a better understanding of. And I think there's some selective licensing schemes that do measure that, for example, like the extent to which different behaviours have changed and properties have improved as a result of these schemes. So perhaps there's learning that could be gained from there. But I think you're right to pinpoint it as an area that needs significant improvement, this data collection and measurement, because how do we know what's working? How do we know if anything's getting better?
Yeah, thank you. And my last question in this section is around the court system, because, of course, to enforce some of these rights, it may require county court action, and we already know there's issues with courts and backlogs, and I think one of the House of Commons Select Committees has recently described the county court system as dysfunctional. Will that prove a barrier, and what could ameliorate that?
I mean, again, I think that's something that has been sort of widely discussed and reported is the kind of delays that exist within the court system, like for possession claims, which are, you know, I think on average about 8 or 9 months, you know, and there is, of course, a concern that whilst, yes, we want to protect tenants with this act and we want to tackle illegal behaviour, we also need to maintain landlord confidence as well, and where landlords have a valid possession claim, that you know, is something that can be kind of processed as quickly as possible. But obviously, yeah, 8 or 9 months is a long time. I don't know. Again, I think there's been a lot of statements over the last sort of 4 or 5 years from this and the previous government about working with the, you know, working with the court system to ensure it's ready to measure capacity. But I think we're really lacking on detail. It would be good to have a little bit more detail exactly where they're at, like what is success, like what is readiness, you know, what is success? That's something that I don't believe is clear yet. I don't have much more to add to that.
I think that's quite clear. Yeah, thank you. I don't know if Christine, whether you want, yes.
Sorry. Hi, Peter.
I just wanted to add one more thing as well, because I think as well we have a lack of kind of opportunities for landlords and tenants to resolve things early and consensually. You know, if you look at the TDS group, we resolve over 20,000 tenancy deposit related disputes every year. Then those are cases that would otherwise end up in the court system. And so I think there's something around exploring more opportunities for alternative and early dispute resolution. I think it's exploring what support exists for tenants who fall into rent arrears, because rent arrears are higher in London than the rest of the country. They're at about 16% around amongst private rented tenants, as opposed to about 12% nationally. There also is a higher percentage of people who are in 6 months or more. You know, so we have at the TDS group a free mid-tenancy dispute resolution service. So that's not deposits, that's like other issues, rent arrears, disrepair, etc. And we find that when people do come to the service, use the service, it has a very high sustainment rate. So we have about 85% of tenancies that are sustained when people come early enough. So when rent arrears have been only accrued over 1 or 2 months, generally the landlord is amenable to finding a solution, right? Contrary to popular opinion, like landlords are also in favour of longer tenancies. Voids and turnovers are costly, right? So, but the problem is that people, both tenants and landlords, often will approach these services only when rent arrears have accrued over a number of months, and then by that point, relationship has broken down, and the landlord just wants the tenant out. And then so I think that's something that needs to be explored as well, is what opportunities for early and consensual resolution and support for tenants, and I think that's a little bit of the motivation behind sort of the changing the rules around the mandatory ground for possession, where they've increased the threshold before which landlord can use that ground. I believe it's from 2 to 3 months, and then the notice period has been increased, I think, from 2 to 4 weeks. You might want to just check that, but I think that's roughly it. So I think the motivation behind that is like giving tenants a little bit more time who are in arrears to try to find a resolution, trying to provide more opportunities for landlords and tenants to work together. But again, I don't think alongside that has there been any assessment of what support exists.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. And Chair, I don't know whether I should do, but about 20 years ago, I was actually an adjudicator for the tenancy deposit scheme. So, but I just probably should just mention that in passing. Professor Whitehead, I'm afraid we can't hear you at the moment. Oh, we can't hear. You can't hear us. Okay. Well, I'll pass back to the Chair.
Thank you. Is that every question? And we'll try and bring Christine back in a minute. But while we're just trying to sort that out, I might just ask a quick question to you, just to follow up, just specifically on what changes the Act might. What changes do you expect deaf and disabled private renters to experience as a result of the Renters' Rights Act? I don't know if that's a specific group of people that you've consulted within the survey. I don't know if people identified as deaf and disabled, but.
So our survey, not specifically deaf and disabled, but we do ask about whether people are living with a long-term mental or physical health issue, and that's about a third of tenants. And generally, this group of tenants, our survey shows, are at disproportionate risk of housing-related harm. So disproportionate risk of living in properties which are of poor condition, which are no doubt either sort of is exacerbating or causing some of these issues in the first place. Heightened issues around affordability, difficulties accessing the sector, and lower kind of feelings of security within the sector. So this is one of a very vulnerable group, I would say. Now, of course, if the Act was successful in achieving its aims of improving security, improving property conditions, then you'd expect the experiences for these groups to improve. Now, one slightly concerning finding from our most recent survey, which looks at tenants' awareness and attitudes towards the Act, shows that this group of tenants living with long-term health issues, were actually were least likely to be aware of the Act and what it meant for them, and also most likely, or one of the groups that were most likely to be sort of not feeling very optimistic, shall I say, about the impact that will have, not feeling that it's actually going to have much of a beneficial impact in their lives. So, yeah.
That's really helpful. That was really clear. Thank you. And I know we're going to come up to like renters awareness, and it'd be good to pick that up again then. I'm just going to see if we've got Christine back. Can you hear us, Christine?
Have you got me back?
Yeah, we've got you back. Did you want to come in? I know when Assembly Member McCarthy was asking questions, did you want to come in there?
I think the thing which worries me most is that there's very large numbers of people who, both landlord and client, simply cannot afford the rent or the investment that is sort of necessary to get the basic standards. So that an awful lot of the problem is the sort of bottom third of the local area. And apologies, I've got to go and open the door.
Assembly Member Boff?
Actually, Dr. Harris, one of the you indicated first of all that the capacity of local authorities may be patchy, or their willingness may be patchy. Do you think that their performance statistics in this area should be published compulsorily?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I have an opinion on that, because I'm not sure if the research says that publishing. You mean like publicly publishing those statistics?
Yes. I mean, how many times, how long it's taken for a council to respond, perhaps, to a complaint, and you know, in the good old days, we had the Audit Commission, and you could compare one local authority with another. Now you require FOIs, and it all becomes rather complicated. Do you think a statute, I mean, would it certainly help if local authorities had to maintain those statistics?
Certainly a requirement to report to central government of their activities, I think, would make absolute sense, because as I mentioned earlier, then we could kind of have some kind of measurement of, you know, how well this act's been enforced. I couldn't say whether publishing them publicly is something that would incentivise proactive enforcement. I don't know. So
it would end up as public. There's very little that's private.
So I'm afraid our research doesn't really have a strong view on that.
We wanted to investigate a little about what are the kind of perhaps Professor Whitehead could answer if the Act brings any risks for the long-term future of the private rented sector in London.
I think it's a very real issue because basically to provide reasonable long-term security puts the amount of money necessary above what people can afford. And so there's always going to be this tension between trying to do the best we can and in fact reducing the availability because people can't afford it. I think that's fundamental.
Am I right to say, is this a no-brainer, that this certainly isn't going to result in an increase in supply of private rental properties? Perhaps I'm wrong.
I think I would be very surprised if you turn out to be wrong on that.
Right. And how might we mitigate the risks that there are to the private rented sector as a result of this legislation?
What? It's very difficult because basically we've got a large number of people who cannot afford even a basic rent. And that can't be changed unless we subsidise it in one way or another.
And you earlier commented that despite the good intentions of this Act, there will still be an unregulated market going on in London.
In some parts of London, it will be the majority.
The majority of London, it will be unregulated?
Not across London, but in some parts of London, there will be very few people who are fully providing the quality which we were looking for. So What I'm sort of warning about is not, don't try to make it too much what us middle class people would like it to be, because that will mean that they won't get accommodation at all, or they'll get very much worse accommodation.
I mean, that's quite an astonishing assertion, and that for a lot of people who need it most, it will have little effect. Would that be fair to say that?
Well, I think one can hope that we can make it better than I'm making it sound. But on the other hand, in poor parts of London, we're talking about not being able to afford the basic standards that we're looking at.
Dr. Harris, is there any evidence that landlords are leaving the market in anticipation of the Act, or do you have any data on that?
We do have some data on that. So I think, first of all, it's important to acknowledge that landlord behaviour isn't driven by a singular factor. Sure. So that's, I think, the first thing to be aware of. In our last survey, 37% of landlords said in London said they added properties to their portfolio, and 17% said they removed it. Now, if larger portfolio landlords are adding properties as opposed to and smaller landlords with smaller properties or smaller portfolios are selling them, that doesn't, then it might not lead to a growth in the sector per se. But a lot of the data sources out there, English Housing Survey, census data, our data suggest that the size of the sector is remaining largely static, right? There's still a problem because we know demand has increased. I would say we don't expect a mass exodus of landlords from the sector as a result of the Act. However, those that did sell properties, 54% cited regulatory change as the main reason for selling, and 40% cited changes to tax regimes. So whilst singular changes might not cause landlords to leave, we have to be conscious of the cumulative effect of regulatory changes, and there's more on the horizon, of course, with new minimum energy efficiency standards as well. The one trend I think we do need to be aware of, which is concerning, our data and data from Trust for London shows that the PRS in London is shrinking in the most affordable part of the market, right? So from our data, last year, in 2024, 20% of landlords who said they were renting specifically, like targeting tenants in receipt of housing benefit, sold properties. A year later, it rose to 37%. So almost doubled in a year. And again, there are other data sources that are suggesting that landlords in that part of the market are more likely to be selling. So I think that is a trend that is concerning, and that is something that needs to be monitored. I wouldn't say that behaviour is necessarily solely a result of the Act, as I said, but we need to pay attention to the result of cumulative regulatory changes. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer. But
So it looks like an Act that has the intention to solve problems will actually be the catalyst for creating a few. Is that
I think
fair?
In proportionate terms, it's definitely well worth doing, but there are inherent issues where the tensions are such as you were describing.
I think it's always important to monitor the potential for unintended consequences of any piece of legislation, right? As I said, I don't think there will be a mass exodus to landlord as a result of the Act. The data doesn't bear that assertion up. No. I think there's pressures in the more affordable part of the market for many different reasons. But I think I think the other kind of trend we do need to monitor as a potential unintended consequence is around the limiting of rent in advance. So landlords will also ask for more than 1 month's rent in advance where a household is seen to be higher risk, and that practice is more prevalent in London. So there is a risk that now that that's becoming illegal under the Act, they can only take 1 month's rent in advance, is that more landlords will be asking for guarantors. And of course, for people that are like students, recent migrants, or are unable to supply a UK guarantor, they might then experience additional barriers to accessing the sector and landlords as a result of some of these changes. Again, this is something to monitor. I'm not saying this is definitely going to happen, but something to monitor. Could landlords become more risk averse to who they're letting to?
So this may actually impact disabled people as well, people with
I think
disabilities.
it's something we need to monitor. I think there is a risk that I don't have data on the percentage of people who are, people living with disabilities that have offered rent in advance. I can certainly go away and see if our data says anything on that. But there is a risk that some groups of tenants might find it more difficult to access the sector. It's something to monitor. Yeah.
I mean, I realise this data, is current but not complete. Is there a risk that some landlords might just switch their properties to holiday lets? Do you think is that a threat? I mean, there are restrictions on holiday lets which would. Perhaps Professor Whitehead, is there a risk from some landlords just switching to holiday lets?
I think there are some landlords will definitely switch to holiday lets in particular parts of the city. But equally, they may, if that option wasn't there, they may come out of it altogether and just sell into the general market. But the short-term let issue is very important indeed.
And we talked about data, Professor Whitehead. What data would be required to monitor the effect of the Act on standards for private renters, do you think?
Well, we've got a legal framework which says what people have got to do, and the monitoring role is to see whether that's happening. And I think the honest answer is that probably as high as a third of the total can't actually afford to meet the criteria that we're setting out.
Thank you. I think, Chair, I've asked everything.
Yeah. I've got a couple of follow-ups to come in. I don't know if anyone... Yeah, do flag if you've got anything else you want to ask. I just wanted to tease out some of what was being said there around when Assemblymember Boff was kind of summarising that the people that we're trying to support might be the people who don't benefit from this. Is there anything that you think that could be done to mitigate that, like the unintended consequences? Is there anything you think it'd be good for the mayor or local authorities to be doing to make sure that we limit that as much as possible? I know monitoring will be a big part, but...
Well, there's a tension, isn't there? But if you actually try to impose the rules right across the board, then you'll probably lose about a third of your cheap end of the market. So you are making a guess about what's best, but you certainly can't. You can't meet everything, and if people are poor and the housing is expensive, then by definition, you're going to have problems. We just have to address them as they come along.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to, some of the points you've both made already about the importance of monitoring and that capacity assessment. Was there anything you wanted to add to Dr. Harris?
So one thing that the TDS Charitable Foundation has developed is an interactive website called the My Housing Issue Gateway. So I encourage you after the session to go have a look at it. It's something that's received support and been developed in collaboration with organisations from across the sector, including NRLA and Generation Rent. This is an interactive signposting, free interactive signposting and diagnostic tool to support tenants to figure out where to go and what to do and how to make a complaint, right, when something goes wrong with a tenancy, because that's essentially what the removal of Section 21 is trying to do, right, empower tenants to make complaints. But our research shows that many tenants aren't aware of the different redress pathways that exist. Because when you think about the private rented sector, right, so if you went through a letting agent, you have two ombudsman schemes. You have 3 adjudication schemes if your disputes regarding deposits. You have the county courts for some disputes. You have the tribunal for others. You have the new landlord ombudsman coming, right? So this redress landscape is really complex, right? And tenants find it really difficult to know where to go and what to do if they need to raise a complaint. So this website is is, and the thing is, right, we talk about information, we need more information for tenants and landlords. There's lots of information out there, right? But it's difficult for tenants because, well, there is a lot there. It's often not personalised or tailored to the individual query. It's full of technical jargon. They find it difficult to assess the validity of different sources. And this is all stuff shown within our research. So I think this website is potentially something that could be promoted throughout London as a means to help tenants to be aware of the new rights and, if necessary, know how to make a complaint. And the reason that I think that this is helpful for all sorts of different groups of tenants is because research shows that if you provide information and light touch assistance to people, many are able to self-help, right? And then that in turn frees up capacity from the legal advice and support sector to assist those who have the most complex queries and who are the most vulnerable. So that would be one of my suggestions, I think, for how both councils and the mayors could help.
Yeah.
Did you want to come in, Professor Whitehead?
No, I think, it's all too easy to say we can't do very much right down the bottom for the fact that there isn't very much money down the bottom. But I think you can do, you can change the feel of the system so that people realise that there's some benefits to them obeying the rules. And I think that can help enormously.
Thank you. I have one other quick question on this area, just because of the conversation with the fear of falling supply, which I know that you explained there, Jennifer, really clearly. But do you think that this has any implications for some of the other policies that we see in this area, such as acquiring homes from landlords, councils being resourced to be able to buy back those homes, or regulating the short-term rental market, or property taxing empty homes? Do you think there's any, what do you think of those policies as a kind of mitigation?
I think they've all got their benefits, and it's important that if they are implemented, they're implemented to the point where something happens rather than just another random suggestion.
Yes, I think that's a good point. Did you want to comment on that at all? Is that anything that...
That's not something we've looked at extensively within our research, but I do think in London we have a specific challenge where, across the country, but particularly in London, where many councils are relying on the private rented sector to fulfil their statutory homelessness duties. And I think that creates potentially a bit of a tension and potentially some reluctance to enforce the new rules if it's seen to negatively impact supply in an already highly constrained housing market.
I mean, some of the work which we've done, LSE has done on that, the interface between the homelessness story and the minimum quality of standards is very important. And, we've got London's homelessness and numbers of people defined as homeless is enormous as compared to anywhere else in the country.
Did you want to come back on anything else there, just in around? Because I think we did talk about this dynamic within the first panel. It's something that Assemblymember Moema was asking the councils about this dynamic between how they actually interact with availability of temporary accommodation and the use of the private rented sector. So it is I think it is a really interesting part of what might happen.
I think it absolutely is. And again, how that plays out in different councils would be interesting to investigate further, because again, all in terms of like the private housing teams, they're all configured slightly differently in councils, and so some councils will be working quite closely with their homelessness teams, and others perhaps less so. So I think that would be something that's interesting to explore. But we have done qualitative research with tenants who have told us stories of where it appears as if councils seem reluctant to take enforcement actions because of pressures in housing, other areas of the housing market. We spoke to a tenant who reported being told to stay in the property despite landlords not complying with the notices simply because they said, look, we don't have anywhere else. So,
yeah.
Yeah, and I think is that what you were alluding to as well, Christine, around the quality element? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. Nothing else from anyone on this section? Doesn't look like it. Okay, we'll go on to Assemblymember Baker.
Thanks, Chair. I've got some questions. We've touched upon this, we've just started touching upon this just now, but it's about how important that renters understand their rights and responsibilities. So if I could start with you, Dr. Harris. So in terms of making sure the Act is actually successfully implemented, how important, I mean, this is a pretty, the answer is a lot. But how important is it? How would you quantify how important it is that renters understand their rights and responsibilities in terms of the success of the Act overall?
Well, I mean, if we look at what happened in Scotland, for example, so they implemented a similar set of reforms, and that have been evaluated by Indigo House, and they found sort of 5 years down the line, the success of those measures, the success of the removal of their version of no-fault evictions and empowering tenants and improving feelings of security was being severely undermined by lack of awareness, even now, of people's rights, of their rights and responsibilities. So I think it's really essential that we don't make the same mistake here. So we've done a survey recently. It shows 65% of renters in London had either not heard of the Act or didn't understand its implications. And actually, that's slightly better than the rest of the country. So,
I do think it is, yes.
Yeah. So, and even when we asked tenants, if you had a problem with the condition or quality of your property, would you know where to go next? And 40% said no. Right. So that's around kind of protections that already exist. And people that said yes, you say, well, where would you go? And they say, my mum and dad, my local MP, so they're not necessarily able to identify correct redress pathways. So I just think it's absolutely key. It's to the success of this reform if we're going to remove Section 21 to empower tenants to raise complaints, but tenants don't know where to go when they have a complaint or that they have a right to make a complaint in the first place. Nothing changes, right? So. And I think the issue is that a lot of existing information channels just aren't working. So the How to Rent Guide is a document that all landlords and letting agents are legally required to provide to tenants at the start of their tenancy. And only 37% of tenants recall receiving this document. That doesn't necessarily speak to the frequency in which it's issued. That's how often they recall receiving it, because you're moving in, you're stressed, you're giving your tenancy agreement, your EPC certificate, your deposit protection certificate, etc., and the How to Rent Guides, So... and people don't proactively educate themselves. I think people look for information when they have a problem, which is where the My Housing Issue Gateway is. I have a problem, what do I do? Is trying to get at. I can speak to landlords as well if you like, but that's.
I think, that we're going to come on to landlords. So yes, we'll just stick with renters at the moment.
Yeah.
So, do you have any information on what particular measures in the Act are the most significant gaps between renters' understanding and what they do? Does that make sense? What are the bits of the Act that are most at risk of not being implemented because renters don't understand or?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because tenants said in our survey that perhaps unsurprisingly, the main sort of way in which the people that were aware of the Act, the main resource in which they heard it through was the news, right? Yeah. So it's like whatever's being reported in the news the most, So they potentially hear more about Section 21, for example. That might be more common knowledge. But I think awareness is pretty poor across the board. I'm not sure we have that level of detail that we could say these areas they're very well informed and they're not. I would say it's probably fair to say that across the board, both in relation to existing rights and the ones that are to come, tenant awareness and understanding is very poor. Yeah. It's very poor, and it is unfortunately poorest amongst those tenants who are most in need of it, So tenants living on the lowest income in the cheapest properties, long-term disabilities, are the least aware of their rights. So,
and I mean, again, that seems perfectly obvious, but do you have data to back that up as well? Obviously, those are most at risk and least likely to be able to understand their rights and then exercise them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's fine. Are there any specific aspects in terms of London's renters, in terms of legal literacy or digital access or ESOL needs that might affect London's rollout slightly differently to anywhere else?
So recent migrants was one group which was shown to have a lower awareness of their housing rights. We know that migrants are more likely to live in the PRS than other housing tenures, are also more likely to face poor and exploitative housing conditions. So I think that's something that would probably play out in London more than the rest of the country.
That's fine. And is there any advice you have or any suggestions in terms of accessible formats for advice so that people can understand the rights? So, for instance, disabled Londoners are more likely to be able to access their rights. Is that something that you've looked into at all?
I mean, in terms of the My Housing Issue Gateway, we tried to make it interactive, personalised, simple language, accessible for people using screen readers, etc. But of course, there's, you're not going to, it doesn't have a translation function, for example. So there's, it's when you're talking about a tenant population as large and varied as that which exists in London, I think we need a multifaceted approach. I don't think you can have just like a one solution like the How to Rent guide. So.
Yeah. And do you have any views about what the most effective measures would be to increase renters' understanding of their rights and responsibilities? And I think it'd be interesting to know those overall, and then specifically if there are any that the Mayor can influence.
So sorry, can you?
Sorry. What would be the best things to do to increase renters' understanding of their rights and responsibilities in the new Act? What biggest measures are there? And of those, are there any that the Mayor can have specific influence on?
The second bit hard.
Please.
Professor Whitehead, did you want to come in there and then come back? Yeah. Did you want to start with that second part, Professor Whitehead?
Really, I think that it is just extremely difficult, and the bottom end of the market can't afford to maintain the standards which we're hoping for, and so there's always going to be a tension.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Harris, did you have anything?
So I think, if you think about like some of the changes that relate to how your tenancy is played out from day one, right? So notice periods, rights around eviction, the shift to periodic tenancies. You'll see we work quite closely with Crisis around developing some joint guidance, and we've looked at kind of the queries that tenants have been sending through to help shape that guidance, and tenants don't necessarily understand that periodic tenancy might actually benefit them. They somehow think the fixed is more secure. So again, that again feeds back to a lack of understanding and awareness. Understanding and awareness that you have the legal right to challenge, some of these decisions, because, there is an assumption that the courts are going to be absolutely inundated with tenants challenging a Section 21 eviction, but there'll be a significant proportion of tenants that see that notice and just leave, and they won't know that actually there are new eviction grounds, that there are new procedures that landlords have to follow. They'll just go, or that they could challenge it.
And just picking up on that, my final question is, because even if somebody does know they've got a right, doesn't necessarily mean that they can find a way of challenging it, for instance, going to a tribunal or anything like that. Have you any views on the roles sort of local advice organisations, local authority and community groups can play in assisting tenants to actually exercise their rights when they do understand them?
Yeah, I'm really pleased you've raised that point, because again, I think it's been largely absent from a lot of the discussions around the Act, is the capacity and the role of the advice sector to support tenants in enforcing their new rights. I think it's absolutely essential. One encouraging bit of data from our recent study on awareness was that in London, advice and support agencies seem to have more of a role to play in improving people's awareness. So more people in London went to these resources for information than in the rest of the country. So, but again, that's just like piece of the puzzle, isn't it? So I think the My Housing Issue Gateway, so for people who are able to self-help, and then the advice sector for people that need sort of legal advice and assistance. Yeah.
Thanks. Back to you, Chair.
That was really interesting. Thank you. Does anything else from Professor Whitehead before we move on? And then we've got next section.
I think I've done what I can.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think it's the reality is that, you know, about in some parts of London, it could be the bottom third, but really they can't afford to have accommodation which is of the quality which we would like them to have. And so we always are making a trade-off between ensuring that standards are met and that we haven't just excluded people by making them too expensive.
Absolutely. OK, we're going to move on to landlord's understanding, and that's over to Assembly Member Small-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, panellists. Yeah, my question is very much a continuation of the last one, but focused on landlords. So just how aware do you think landlords are of the measures in the Act?
Not very. That seemed to shut everybody up.
Yeah, we definitely enjoyed that response, and we're laughing in the room. I don't know if you can hear, but I think I'll pass to Dr. Harris now.
So our data didn't specifically query landlords on their awareness and understanding of the Act, but we do have regular questions that we ask about their understanding and awareness of the law in general. So around a fifth of landlords, both in London and nationally, say they find it difficult to keep up with changes to the law. And around a third say they think changes to the law is not clearly communicated. I think you've spoken to the NRLA, who we work closely with from the landlord side in terms of education, information, and they have a really key role to play. But I think it's important to recognise that only around 5% of landlords nationally are members of the NRLA. So yes, they have a role to play, but how are other landlords going to find out about these changes? And again, it varies. As I said, landlords with smaller portfolios that are self-managing tend to have lower levels of understanding and awareness than landlords with larger portfolios or those that...
I think it's important to bring the local authority in, because ultimately they're the ones who are having to deal with it. So I think it would be better if there was more interest from the local authority than is often shown.
I think that ties back to the point I made right at the beginning of the session, which is the role of local authorities, not just in enforcing, but in educating, supporting and informing landlords. And I don't think that's been part of discussion, the capacity that they have, the willingness, what activities exists, etc. And I think it's important to recognise how common some other behaviours are which are going to become illegal. So 32% of landlords in our survey said they accepted rent over the asking price, right? So that's a huge, and that's just there's other of course lots of other areas of behaviour that are going to need to change. So again, I think the education piece is really significant. And yes, we have the new landlord database, which I think has the potential to play a very significant role in educating both landlords and tenants, and of course aiding enforcement through councils. But that's not going to be operational for another couple of years, so well after many of the new provisions have come into effect.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, so it's going to be a very difficult transition period, I feel. And I fear also that I need to go. But I wish you luck. And I think it's really important that you maintain an understanding of how it's all being implemented and whether we can improve that implementation over time.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Harris, just the point you made about self-managing, I think it's an interesting one. Do you know what the percentage of landlords in London self-manage versus use a managing agent?
I'd have to come back to you with the specific data, because I think it is slightly more landlords use a letting agent for full management services in London. I think it's around 40% versus about a third nationally, but I will confirm the exact figures with you.
I think that's right. It's about 40%. But it's always going to be variable.
Yeah, because it would be easier, obviously, for them to, you would think, implement and reflect on some of the legal changes that have happened than people who are self-managing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a real role for letting agents here to support the transition and support compliance. But of course, with ROPA, the regulation of property agents sort of not being on the political agenda anymore, we do have a largely unregulated letting agent sector. So letting agents have a real role to play in supporting, educating landlords, but also letting agent practice varies considerably as well. So that's a challenge we face.
Absolutely.
And just in terms of landlords, because I mean, I feel like you can Google the measures in the Renters' Rights Act, and I don't think they're that complex to understand. Is it that people don't understand them, aren't aware of them, or just don't know how they're going to implement them?
I think that they just generally a lot of people just get involved in being a landlord for one reason or another and don't feel about the technical relationships at all.
I think as with tenants, you have a really diverse landlord population as well. We speak about both groups in quite homogenised terms, but there's somewhere we're not sure exactly between 2.3 and 2.7 million landlords. We think there's about 500,000 landlords in London alone, right? So our research shows that some of these landlords have very proactive information-seeking strategies, so they will make good use of the new landlord database when in operations, and others seek information reactively. So when something goes wrong, they get caught out, tenant brings something to their attention. So I think it's not just about education information, that's an important part of it, but we actually need to think about, within the sector, how do we encourage behavioural change? How do we encourage a more kind of proactive approach to managing your property and to educating yourself?
Absolutely. And apologies, I must go.
Thank you.
Just my final question, and thank you very much, is just on, you mentioned local authorities and the role that they could play. How do you think this information can be best communicated to all those disparate landlords who come from very different backgrounds and have different arrangements in terms of how their properties are managed?
Again, I think we need a multifaceted approach. I don't think there can just be a one size fits all. But local authorities, they used to. I'm not sure many have the resources and capacity to do sort of like landlord forums and education material and stuff like that, training sessions, accreditation schemes. Again, that varies widely from council to council. As I said, letting agents have a role to play. Deposit protection schemes have a role to play. But there might also be other sort of organisations, tradespersons, mortgage lenders. There might, I think we need to think a bit more expansively about how we get the information out there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That was a really good recommendation to end on. Is there anything else anyone would like to ask? If not, we're going to draw it to a close. Great, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really insightful. And thanks to Professor Whitehead, who's had to leave, but big thanks to her contributions as well. I found that really insightful. We're going to have a short break and we will restart at 3:15. Thank you. Welcome back to today's Housing Committee meeting, where we're discussing implementing and monitoring the Renters' Rights Act in London. Please can I welcome our second panel of guests. So we have Tom Copley, Deputy Mayor of Housing and Residential Development, Vicky Perlman, Housing Policy Manager, Greater London Authority, and Peter Hakin, Regional Lead for London Operation Jigsaw. Welcome. We have a number of questions. I'm going to kick us off and then I'll pass to colleagues. So just to open up with a broad question, and maybe starting with you, Deputy Mayor, what do you think the Renters' Rights Act can realistically achieve across London?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think it's going to have a huge impact on London, not least because London, of course, proportionally has more renters than anywhere else in the country. So, I feel like the impact is going to be disproportionate here. And I think this is actually a great moment to celebrate the fact that the Renters' Rights Act is now imminently coming into force. And I know in your previous session you heard from organisations like London Renters Union and I think maybe Generation Rent and groups like that. And I think the fact that this legislation is where it is now is testament to the huge campaigning and lobbying effort that those groups put in. I also want to give a shout out to Vicky and the private renter sector team at the GLA, because almost everything that they'd been lobbying for on the Mayor's behalf is included in the Renters' Rights Act. So not just, of course, the ban on no-fault eviction, but things like longer notice periods, the national database, pet-friendly policies, things like that. And I remember when I started in this role 6 years ago, straight in there with Vicky and the private renters sector team, renters' rights, no-fault eviction, getting the ban through. And there were definitely times when it felt like it was never going to happen. So to have arrived at this point is a very big moment. And I think it's absolutely right that the committee is now sort of turning its attention to, well, it's great that we've got the legislation, it's great that we've got the Act. How is it going to work? How is it going to be enforced and things like that? But Vicky, do you want to add anything based on your years of pushing on this particular issue?
Thanks, Tom. I didn't pay him to say that. I think it is. We have worked for a very long time to get to this point, and I think renters stand. Well, the private renter sector in London stands to improve on the back of it. This is a piece of legislation that kind of redresses the balance a bit between landlords and tenants, but absolutely still contains protections for landlords who need to manage their properties or portfolios in particular ways. We do have a challenge on our hands to make sure that, as the committee has already talked about, that renters and landlords know about their responsibilities and their rights, and that local authorities have the capacity and the staffing and resources that they need in order to support landlords to do the right thing, to support renters to be able to use their rights and to enforce when it goes wrong. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that this afternoon.
If I could just add one thing, I think one of the key things about this is stability, and the committee will have heard me say many times before about private renting in this country, particularly compared to some of our neighbouring countries and even to parts of North America. It has been far too easy for landlords to get rid of tenants off and on, with no reason at all because of no-fault eviction. We know that more and more people are renting privately for longer, and therefore the importance of creating that stability has become even greater. So, I think that that's one of the major impacts we're going to see now, is people being able to stay in their homes for longer, and what I hope will be the consequent downward pressure on homelessness.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to come in on the same question?
Yes, I do have a few things to add to that. So, I think it will deliver most of what it was set out to deliver, which is fair access to renters under Part 1 of the Act, security of tenure, because obviously the abolition of Section 21 no-fault evictions. And I think there's likely to be more stability in rent levels as well, because there are restrictions on the amount by which the rents can go up by, and it can be an annual increase and so forth. In addition to that, though, for local authorities, there's likely to be better funding. In fact, we talked about funding earlier, but in fact, there is light at the end of the tunnel there with the funding that's likely to come from membership of the database. So there's likely to be more funding available for local authorities for enforcement. Possibly some reduced costs for local authorities if they're dealing with people that are being evicted and getting them back in their homes. The conversations tend to be at the moment, do the local authorities owe them a duty to rehome? That may reduce and we may get people back in their homes that are currently being evicted. Also, local authorities under the new powers for investigation will be better able to identify the rogue landlords and tackle them. There are extensive new powers available, so hopefully we'll be able to more effectively deal with the rogues. I do have some concerns about the Act. I don't know, Chair, if you want me to go into that, or is that for a later question? Or,
no, I was going to ask a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I was giving everyone an opportunity to speak, but that was going to be one of my... a follow-up question. You can go on with the concerns.
There's issues with the enforceability of Part 1. Dr. Harris spoke about the resources available. It's not just that. There's issues with the enforceability, in particular Part 1. I'm not so concerned about Part 2, which is the landlord database, which itself is going to have challenges for enforcement, but Part 1. So to give you some examples, if a landlord got possession under Section 8 of the Housing Act 1988 because they want their family to move in, which is a reasonable ground for possession, they're supposed to leave it vacant for a year. That's to deter people just using it as an excuse to get tenants out. Well, how are we going to know? I say we, I mean local authorities. How are we going to know if they move tenants in within a couple of months? It's relying on the tenant to tell the local authorities that's what's happening. It's going to be a very difficult one. The other one is the discrimination grounds. So, for example, we're not supposed to be discriminating on grounds that they've got children or that they're on benefits. Well, you imagine, as would be typical in London, you have 10 people going for the same property. 3 are on benefits, 7 are not. They can't advertise no DSS. They can't say no children, so absolutely that's easy to enforce. But you've got 10 people going, you've got 3 people on benefits, and the landlord chooses someone that's not on benefits, and then the person that's on benefits says, I've been discriminated against, and they complain to the council. How do you investigate that? Because you're investigating a thought process for the landlord. We don't know what the thought process was. It's a very, very difficult one to address. That could also have unintended consequences that Dr. Harris spoke about earlier. It may mean that at the moment, when you can say no one on benefits, people on benefits know not to apply. Well, in future, that may not be the case. They may apply for housing, and actually the landlord's already made up their mind. They're not going to accept them if they're on benefits, and it's a very difficult thing to enforce. We're concerned about the rental bidding thing. So rental bidding is being prohibited. It may actually end up going in reverse. So there's concerns at Jigsaw that what might happen is what happens when you sell properties. So at the moment, if you sell a property, you put it up at a high price, you accept the nearest offer. There's nothing to stop that, as far as I can make out, in the legislation to do with rents. So if the market rent is £2,000, a landlord might be tempted to put it at £2,500, which is above market rent, knowing they won't achieve that, but saying to people, will you give me the best offer near £2,500? So the unintended consequences might be that we see a reversal now of what currently happens with rental bidding. So that will be very unhelpful, and I think that is, if there's anything with the Act, that's an omission there. I have got a few other things as well, but I'm mindful of time, actually, and other people might want to speak. So, if Chair, I'll hand back and see.
And we've got lots of other questions for you to come in, and then we'll give you an option at the end to input anything you feel you haven't had an opportunity to raise. But that was really helpful. We are going to come on to some of the ways of maybe being aware or solving some of those. But just on this introductory section, just to come back to Tom and Vicky, just to understand if there was any gaps in the Act that you were kind of pushing for. Obviously, I know this is a cross-party committee, but the Mayor is on record of supporting rent controls and obviously any other measures that you might have been pushing for that weren't included in the Act. Obviously, we heard in our first panel around the Decent Home Standard not being introduced till 2035, which is a big concern. So, yeah, anything else that is kind of missing or you're concerned about?
I mean, the big one was the one that you've raised, Chair, which was around rent controls. Now, that's not to say that the Act, I keep wanting to call it the bill, but the Act doesn't go some way towards addressing affordability, as other colleagues on the panel have touched on. The ability now to effectively go to a rent tribunal without fear of retaliatory eviction. It'll be interesting to see how the impact that has. So that would in theory stop landlords from, jacking up rents very high beyond, what a fair market rent would be, in order to evict a tenant or something like that. So there are things in the bill that go some way to address that, but not what the Mayor has been lobbying for. There were, I think, some sort of, perhaps smaller things that the team were pushing for. As I say, we got, I think, the vast majority of the things within the bill that we were pushing for. There may have been some smaller things, but the key one was around, the Mayor's ask on devolution of rent control.
I can just jump in on one additional, and I think it was referred to in the session just before. We were very pleased to see the limit on rent in advance be included in the bill quite late on. But we share Jennifer Harris's concerns about the potential for increased use of guarantors and the impact that that's likely to have on more vulnerable renters, particularly in London. So that's something that we're going to be keeping quite a close eye on as it rolls out.
Thank you. There's loads in there, but we've got lots more questions, so I'm going to go over to Assemblymember McCarthy for the next section.
Thank you. A general question first, and it's to Tom and Vicky. What steps is the Mayor taking to support local authorities in implementing the measures?
Thank you, Assemblymember McCartney. Well, as the committee knows, and as you may hear me say a few times today, the Mayor obviously doesn't have any formal powers over private renting. And it is councils that will be responsible for investigating and enforcing breaches of the new legislation. But of course, we do play an important convening role and, as you've heard, a lobbying role in terms of the legislative and regulatory environment as well. I think the key way that the GLA uses its convening power here is through the private rented sector partnership. So this brings together heads of service to share best practice, to discuss solutions to challenges that they face. MHCLG are regular attenders. Jigsaw, I believe, as well, are regular attenders. And I know it's really, really valued by boroughs, and lots of boroughs participate in it. I think the new private rented sector database is going to be really important, and I think it's quite a compliment to the GLA and the checkers that the team have set up, that MHCLG have been asking lots of questions and taking lots of evidence from the team in order to support the development of the national PRS database. And then the other way that we will be helping is, of course, making sure that our tools and checkers are updated. So we are going to be updating those tools. So the road landlord and agent checker with the new offences that are being created under the Act, and also the property licence checker with details of the expanded rent repayment orders. Vicky, would you like to add anything?
You've done a really good job. I think you're right in that our significant input is via our convening role and supporting boroughs to do that. And the fact that the partnership's been running since 2017, I think, and we have a really well-attended partnership meeting every 2 months. Is kind of testament to the fact that how useful boroughs find that. And of course, the Act has given everyone a real reason to be, and planning for the implementation of that has given boroughs a really good reason to be really engaged. I think that's probably enough from me.
Can I ask, one of the issues that have been raised with us is the lack of skills, not just capacity, but skills. Have you actually talked or discussions with the adult education budget team about whether any of that funding could be used, for example, to train environmental health
We
officers
have
or whatever.
begun to do that here,
Yeah.
and my team was working with the careers team here also, and with Pete and his colleagues, MHCRG and others, around, because you're right, it's not just about funding. We know, boroughs tell us all the time, that even where they have the money available, it can be really difficult to attract the skilled people that they need. And there's a real problem in London of passing the parcel, and that you're training people up and then moving to different boroughs. Now, London-wide, that's a great thing because we're getting more experienced officers in different boroughs, but that's a problem for boroughs. So yes, we're certainly working with our with careers colleagues to create kind of video and social media resources that boroughs can use to attract people into the profession in the first place. Nobody knows about environmental health, and if they do, they think it's food. They don't. It doesn't occur to them that there's this incredible social justice kind of role in housing, and that's one of the pieces of work that we're doing. Separately to that, we all kind of in 2021 launched with Middlesex University and CIEH the PRS qualification that our team kind of was led on, and the Mayor part funded the first few cohorts of that, which is directly training up borough officers to do that enforcement role. And it was originally limited to London boroughs, but has been so successful that it's been attracting local people from local authorities from across the country, and other parts of the country are now looking at kind of setting up kind of the same resource there.
That looks very positive. It would be helpful, I think, for the committee to know exactly the numbers that have gone through and how many people that's helped, particularly London. That'd be helpful.
I can share that.
Tom, you want to come back? Then I'm going to come to Peter. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we can definitely share that. I think again, this shows the way that the GLA, despite not having powers in this area, is really adding value. And I think I'm right in saying, the other parts of the country don't have the equivalent PRS partnership. I think that we have in London potentially.
Okay, so Peter, I was going to come to you as well, because you've obviously got sight of a national picture too. What do you think's working well in London? What more could we, as the GLA, the Mayor, do?
One thing I can say, just picking up on that point there, Jigsaw is doing in the regions what the GLA does in London, but not to the extent, because the GLA is better resourced. What I would say is this is such a beneficial thing to have, this policy team. It's unique to London. And I think the London boroughs are very, very fortunate to have this policy team. So the only thing near it is in Greater Manchester. There's something equivalent, but not to the extent. So it's very, very fortunate. Outside of London, Jigsaw is coordinating the regions. But again, because it's one person per region working part-time, they can't do what the GLA does in London. So if there's anything that the GLA can do is to keep that policy unit going, because it really is very, very beneficial for the reasons that you've just heard. Okay. I believe that the database actually was, the national database actually, the genesis was from the database in London. So there's a good example of something that MHCLG have picked up on that originated in London. Just coming back to the training, if I may, one big gap that Jigsaw has identified in London and nationally is not so much on the housing standards. You mentioned environmental health, and there are gaps there, but also on the tenancy relations side. So this is things like dealing with illegal evictions, unlawful evictions. So in a great many cases, tenancy relations teams are advice-based only. They've never done enforcement work. And to move from a position of never having done enforcement work to carrying out full investigations and enforcement and prosecutions is a really big ask. It's very, very challenging. So Jigsaw is working on an apprenticeship scheme for people working in tenancy relations, which will upskill them. We're already doing some training on it. So 2 weeks ago, we had 3 venues in London, in-person training, and hundreds of people attended that. What we discovered from that, from those working in tenancy relations, was they just do not have the experience or the skills. So that is a huge gap that Jigsaw is hoping to bridge. And we're working with the GLA, with the policy team on that in London specifically, to make sure that we help bridge those gaps.
And is that around mediation when things, where there may be non-compliance or whatever? Because we heard earlier about the different tribunals, county court, arbitration schemes there might be, and that it's quite murky as to what you do. So I'm just checking that that's what you mean when you talk about tenancy relations.
Not so much about mediation, no. So if anything, it is that now.
Yeah.
Or usually, because enforcement under the Protection from Eviction Act has been discretionary for boroughs, most of them don't do it because it's discretionary. It's up to them if they do it. It's going to be mandatory from the 1st of May. It's going to be mandatory. They have to carry out enforcement under that act. So usually the conversation is about prevention of is about the duty to rehouse people that have been made homeless as a result of a lawful eviction under Section 21 or an unlawful eviction. It's usually about the duty. What MHCLG were concerned with was exactly that it's fallen upon the local authorities to rehouse people that have been unlawfully evicted or lawfully evicted. What they're anticipating now is a change in the dynamic and a change in the conversation, so that instead of giving advice to tenants about their opportunities and their rights and whether or not we owe them a duty, it will change to an intervention, which will be they get out there and they deal with the unlawful eviction, they stop it happening, and they prosecute and they gather evidence. So that's what MHCLG are anticipating, and that's something that we need to monitor in London. Is that actually happening?
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. And question back to Tom and Vicky, if I can. We've heard there's a lot of inconsistency with the boroughs about enforcement with the current legislation, let alone with the new legislation that's coming shortly. From your view and talking to the boroughs, is it an unwillingness to do it, or is it a capacity issue, or is it both? And what can you do to make sure that there's a consistent approach across London boroughs?
I heard the comments earlier, and I don't think it's certainly not an unwillingness amongst private rented sector teams on the ground to do this work. I think there's I know that there's a huge variation in the size and experience of borough teams. So some of our biggest PRS teams in London are 70 strong. Others are, half a dozen, and that doesn't necessarily reflect the size of the private rented sector in any one of those boroughs. And so therein lies kind of the start of that issue. There has been some boroughs report difficulties getting buy-in from higher above in their boroughs, and different paces of interest, I suppose, and activity from above them in terms of preparedness for the Act and what that will bring. All of the boroughs are represented at the PRS partnership, and 31 out of 33 of them upload cases onto the Rogue Landlord and Agent Checker. So there's no lack of willingness. It's about capacity. And actually, while I've got the mic, I just want to clarify something that was said earlier. We've been talking about the PRS database being modelled on our Rogue Landlord and Agent Checker. It's a part of the database that is modelled on the checker, and that's MHCLG's equivalence. So the one that will report offences committed by landlords. We can't take the credit, although we have worked very closely with colleagues at MHCLG about the wider PRS database that will collect kind of landlord information and property information. We don't have the equivalent here, so that information gathering bit is new and very welcome.
Thank you. And previously, in previous evidence, the effectiveness of training police officers in preventing backdoor illegal evictions has been raised. Is that something that is it an issue? Is it something you're alive to, and what's being done about it?
It is definitely an issue, and we have been taking action on this. So the Mayor has been working with Safer Renting on training for frontline police officers, and 12,000 frontline officers have now had that training. However, we know that this still happens, and it's deeply, deeply frustrating that we still hear reports. In fact, Safer Renting will pass on reports to us when they've been informed of police officers either mistakenly saying this is a civil rather than a criminal matter, or taking the side of a landlord in an illegal eviction. So, while I think this training is really, really important, and I've no doubt that it has had an impact, I think that there is still more that could be done, and we'll be, we're talking to MOPAC, and I'll be talking to Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime about what else we can do to make sure that officers are aware of the facts here.
I think one of the difficulties that we have is that it's still relative, despite how often we hear about kind of illegal evictions. It's still relatively unusual for frontline police officers to attend, and so they're not practiced at it. A couple of years ago, we worked very closely with the Met and with Generation Rent and others to issue new guidance to frontline police officers with a very simple flowchart that basically says if they're being evicted out of office hours by people who look like they may be bailiffs but actually aren't, then that is your sign that this is an illegal eviction. That training is the training that Tom talked about is part of the induction training. So it's new police coming in. So yes, we've reached 12,000 frontline police officers, but we're not reaching kind of existing or older officers in the same, longer standing, should I say, officers in the same way. And like I say, they don't have the practice, although it is on their iPads, and on the way to a reported illegal eviction, they could look up the flowchart and it would tell them exactly what they needed to do. But as Tom said, we're going to go back to we're receiving, perhaps unsurprisingly, beginning to receive increasing numbers of reports of this. We thought this might happen in advance of the Act coming in, and we're back on in conversation with our Met colleagues about what can be done.
Good, thank you. And Peter, you're nodding as if you're well aware of this issue.
Yeah, I concur with everything that's just been said. And one of the problems, actually, or challenges, is that police officers change their roles so often. Yeah. So you change them up, and then a year later you've got new ones. I do think there's a case for better protocols. So we're not talking necessarily about training, but protocols with the police. I know they're there already. They need to be developed in light of the new Act. So at a new thing under the Act is that police are now duty-bound to report. So if they've been first responders, to an incident, they're now under duty to report to the local authority that they did respond and to what evidence they managed to gather. They also, although they're not under a duty to assist the local authorities, they do have a power to assist. So in terms of the protocols, I think that's where there could be some benefit. If local authorities are going to be doing more intervention in terms of illegal evictions and harassment, that's where the greatest threats to the local authority staff come from, in the direct intervention with the landlord. So I think there's some mileage there in having protocols where the police will assist the local authorities in their first response. There is a challenge with having multiple people gathering evidence. We have things called the evidence trail and continuity of evidence, and it's very difficult if you have a first responder gathering evidence and then passing it on to the local authority, because you break the evidence trail and then it's not admissible in court. So having the local authority do the response and do the prosecution, for me, I think that's primary, and I think having the police assist the local authorities in their duties, I think that's probably a better way to go.
Thank you. And then my final question is, in the previous session, we heard about some of the benefits that this could have, but we also heard that actually about a third of the London market is, I suppose, unregulated. We don't know that people are renting out. Is there anything in this or any work going on to identify properties that are being let out illegally? And is there any more we can do? And does this Act give us extra powers to do that?
Well, I think certainly once we've got the National Landlord Database, that will be a huge step forward in terms of boroughs being able to identify which properties are, let's say, if they're not licensed properly, for example, as an HMO, it'll become much, much clearer once local authorities build up that information. Separate to the Renters' Rights Act, of course, we've had the very welcome news, something that's been lobbied for by the Mayor, for the general power to issue licensing schemes to be returned to local authorities. that should help where local authorities want to set up licensing schemes again to enforce against sort of criminal landlords and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Boff.
Mr. Hyken, how many people are you? You said you were assisting with training new officers for their new legislative responsibilities. About how many is that?
There are about 9, I think 8 or 9 of us, plus a bit of support as well, but we all work part-time, so between 2 and 3 days a week. So to cover a region is quite a tall order, but we do bring in people. So, for example, the training
so you're employing 8 or 9 to train?
No, 8 or 9 people for the whole country in terms of regional leads like myself. So one person would be a regional lead for an area, and we work 2 or 3 days a week. But in terms of the training, we're bringing in trainers for that. So we've been doing training in London and in Bristol, and there's more training going on this week in Midlands, and then we're coming back to London next week. So we've brought in a trainer to do that. How many
people on the courses?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry, forgive me. Sorry, forgive me.
No, you're training them.
Oh, about up to 100 people attend each one. And we're at the moment, we've got about 20 courses in the pipeline, and we're planning more. Depending on whether Jigsaw continues next week, we're planning more of them. So this is specifically about the new powers training, and it's in-person training. We're also working with training providers in terms of general apprenticeships and that. But what Jigsaw's conducting is about 20 sessions so far, but it will be increased next year if we continue.
And also, I was wondering about addressing the issue of court capacity to deal with what's going to be more traffic going through the courts. I wonder if we exercised any time on that.
It's certainly something that we are exercised by. It will be crucial that there is sufficient court capacity to manage some of the new rights that renters have, and also to support landlords with new possession grounds. We don't have very much detail from government yet about what that will look like, beyond some words around increased digitisation, which is both friend and foe, depending on how accessible that might be to different renters. Like I say, we are waiting for more information from government on that, but it is something that we've been, and the Mayor has been consistent in calling for through the work on the bill and preceding it.
And what does that support for landlords look like going forward?
I think predominantly it means speeding up. You heard earlier how long it can take for possession cases to go through court now. I think they're averaging kind of 8 or 9 months for Section 21s. And that makes landlords nervous. And so in order to see the full benefits of the Act, I think landlords need to be confident that the Act works for them as well as for renters.
Would you support the idea of it being compulsory for boroughs to publish their performance criteria, performance?
Well, boroughs are going to have to report. The Act contains 50 new data points that boroughs will need to report to government on.
That's very useful. So will that present, and I alluded to the Audit Commission earlier, will that present a stat of how long they've taken to deal with cases, what their caseload is?
I'm not sure exactly what they include, and I don't think it does, but one of the things that we can do through the partnership is that kind of benchmarking and sharing of good practice examples. So we will be working with boroughs to understand what that looks like. I don't think government, the new data requirements cover that kind of service level kind of measurement.
Right, because that's really what I meant. Mr. Hyken, you were...
No, it doesn't. It's about 50 data sets, and it's all, in fact, as Dr. Harris pointed out, it's output related rather than outcome related. So it's number of notices served, numbers of prosecutions, number of fines, amount you got back. It doesn't give service levels. So
Right.
how quickly did you respond to a service request? There's nothing like that in it.
Because isn't that going to be crucial if we anticipate a problem with this wide variation of capacity of local authorities?
Absolutely. And if you're investigating something like an illegal eviction, time is of the essence. If it takes you a week to get out there, you've lost the evidence. So you have to get out there and then. And that goes for so many breaches and offences. So time is of the essence. So absolutely, the response is crucial, yes.
And there is no answer to that, is there?
Well, just to add that I completely agree with Pete that time is of the essence, but I'm so mindful of the different resourcing levels that boroughs have and their capacity to respond with the best will in the world. You know, if they have a very small team and a lot of demands, then, you know, and hopefully the Act will, as Pete has mentioned, hopefully the Act will provide increased resources through registration fees for their PRS database and increased enforcement and keeping of the fees of the fines that result from that. But ultimately, your ability to create those fees and that increased income stream will depend on how big your team is in the first place.
I mean, the government has made a first tranche of about £18 million of new burdens funding available. We're expecting a second tranche to be on the way. It is absolutely vital the government does provide sufficient resources for local authorities and that there's a consistent and predictable funding for this as well, because, yes, this is going to increase the call on local authorities.
Thank you. I think my colleague's going to talk about resourcing now, isn't it? So...
Yeah, maybe. We're just addressing about whether we need to still do it. I was going to ask another question just on the PRS partnership before we come on to that anyway. Just in the first, and maybe this is already happening for the PRS partnership, but one of the comments from the panel before was about a London-wide assessment of local authority capacity, particularly in some of this space. So I don't know if that's something that's already happening or planned or would be helpful.
Yes, it is. It's quite hard to track, to kind of quantify, but we're mindful that the next, as Tom said, the next set of new burdens funding will be coming, well, it should be announced this week or next, I think, which will hopefully give boroughs, and that's, it's a pot of money that's divvied up depending on the size of your PRS. It is something that the PRS partnership could potentially do alongside kind of colleagues from Jigsaw who have that wider look as well.
And just for our understanding, the PRS partnership, have you got examples of where they have influenced a kind of standardisation, or where it's been, like, is there something you can point to?
Oh, I really can, yes.
Of where it's kind of worked well in the fact that it sets us up for this?
Yeah, so we routinely invite boroughs to share good practice and also challenges. And so there is that kind of cross-fertilisation in a very general sense of very specific issues, which predates our work on the bill. In terms of kind of really concrete examples, the PRS, the online tools and checkers were projects of the PRS partnership.
We are coming on to those, just to not go into them too much, but we are coming into those.
But my favourite, I think, is that boroughs use the PRS, the Rogue Landlords and Agent Checker, to do that cross-borough, long-term kind of intelligence work. And a report that came in from through our Reporter Rogue tool has been tracked through kind of all the borough activity, and that landlord has been banned. And that wouldn't have happened without the, of course, banning orders are beginning to become a bit more commonly used, but when this happened, they were very infrequent. And that only happened because of that cross-fertilisation and the concrete kind of resources of the PRS database, the Rogue Landlord and Agent Checker.
And then, yeah, the partnership, you feel like it's structured in a way that they're able, it can have that kind of influence around standardisation, just around kind of enforcement and things.
Yes, the Mayor doesn't have any powers, and the GLA can't make boroughs behave in any particular way. But being able to learn from each other, like I say, we have some very experienced boroughs in some areas and others who are experienced in others, and being able to fertilise those ideas has been a really good way to, and also to be able to share that their insights and expertise with government departments, including MHCLG and the Home Office and others, is a really valuable resource.
Great, thank you. Assemblymember Small-Edwards, did you want to ask any of these questions? I know that some were asked.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask about additional funding required for local authorities, but I think some of it has already been covered. I guess the only thing I would add is just how mechanically increased funding could be used to enhance boroughs' capacity.
It would be predominantly new staff. Additional resources for staff, so tenancy relations officers, housing standards, and we've not mentioned trading standards actually, but some of the new enforcement is likely to be done by trading standards, depending on how the boroughs decide to divvy that up. I have got concerns actually about that because I think there's lots of assumptions being made about trading standards of anyone. They are probably the least resourced of the lot. Training needs, we've talked a lot about training, and that's something that the additional funding would be used is to bridge the gap in training. As well as bringing on trainees, new apprenticeships and new apprentices. The other thing is IT upgrades, because all IT systems are going to need to be upgraded for the new data reporting, as well as providing support for the prosecutions for the legal work. So that's the legal support that they need, and technical support actually. So for example, under the new powers, officers can go in and seize equipment and seize laptops and that. Well, that's fine, but you need to have someone back at the ranch who can access it and get the data out of it. So, we've heard about the new burdens funding, the money from civil penalties and the database fees. I do, just as an aside, in fact, this is something that Jigsaw has concerns with, the ring fencing of the money. We've seen in other parts of the country, I haven't seen it in London yet, but it doesn't mean it's not happening, that they are not ring fencing the money that's been given that should be ring fenced. And I know from experience that accountants in local authorities have got various mechanisms for getting around ring fencing. I won't trouble you with what they are, but I do know what they are. And so that's what's happening. And my concern is with the database. So with the database, as has been explained, that's going to be a regular form of funding. It's guaranteed funding because, you've got so many properties and you've got so much per property, that you're going to get the funding. If it's not ring fenced, if they start taking the money elsewhere, then that money will not be available for local authorities. So coming back to what the GLA can do, I don't know, Chair, what influence the Mayor has over local authorities, but persuading the local authorities to keep that ring fencing and being genuine about it and use it for private sector housing rather than diverting it to other areas would be something I think that perhaps the GLA could play a part in.
Yeah, I think that's a really well-made point, and I think potentially, Chair, could be something that feeds into our recommendations potentially. Tom?
I could say we can certainly make the point, but as I say, the Mayor is not able to direct local authorities. We can make the point as strong as we can. I'm sure everyone that goes to the PRS partnership from boroughs would agree as well. But I think the key thing is making sure that the government is making enough additional and new burdens funding available for local authorities to do their duties under the Act.
And one last thing that I would add is that, as we mentioned earlier, the ability to receive additional income in order to do more enforcement work will depend on the size of the PRS in any borough and also the size of the team, because the amount of enforcement work. So it's a bit chicken and egg, really. We're asking boroughs to be all set up to enforce against a load of really important new duties from which they will be able to recover civil penalties and other fines. But they need to have the resource in place in order to do that enforcement work in the first place.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Assemblymember McCarthy.
But presumably as well, if they are able to enforce, for example, on an illegal eviction, it will save temporary accommodation costs. So there's that cost if they don't use the money appropriately, isn't there? Yeah.
Lots of nodding and great point. Thank you. Assemblymember Boff.
I'm quite interested about the road landlord and agent checker, which you've said is a great example to everyone else. And it's important that that data is transparent, isn't it? And it's very open and can be accessed very easily. Well, I hope that's the direction it stays in. I went to look at the, wanted to look at the selective licensing of Barking and Dagenham the other day. And I was told that it's no longer online, that I have to go to an office, book an appointment to go and look at the selective licensing register. Presumably, it's all there in a beautifully bound book written with a quill pen, because you can't get it online. Would you ever be in a situation where you would put the rogue landlord database? Would you need an appointment at any time to come and look at the rogue landlord database?
I can confirm, Assemblymember Wolf, we have no intention of requiring people to look in a book to access the rogue landlord and agent checker, or indeed the property licence checker.
Yeah. I mean, I got an appointment for Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Apparently this is open government, Chair. This is open government in Barking and Dagenham. Wonderful. Talking of selective licensing, what's the point of it apart from raising money after the Act has gone through?
The point of it is inspection and enforcement. So, you know, I think so. Some people have said, well, now we've got the National Landlord Database. You know, doesn't that negate the need for licensing? No, it doesn't. The National Database is going to be brilliant. It's going to provide a fantastic picture of private renting in the country. Hopefully, it's going to improve the ability of councils to communicate with landlords and I hope renters as well, but it's not a substitute for licensing. Licensing is about inspection and enforcement.
So in those boroughs without a selective licensing scheme, they will not be able to inspect or enforce?
It increases the borough's ability to inspect and enforce. It's much more effective where you've got a licensing scheme in place, which is why more and more boroughs are looking
what particular rights does the local authority have over and above in a selective licence scheme over that which will now be given as a result of the Act?
Well, for one thing, it provides additional resourcing for boroughs to be able to...
Well, that's where we went back to what I said, is apart from just a funding stream to take from landlords.
But it is useful. I think it provides additional abilities as well. I'm going to bring Vicky in here.
Yeah, I mean, we know from boroughs that selective licensing schemes are the best tool that they have in order to bring properties up to standard and to bring landlords who are not compliant with the law into, to enforcement action. More than half of boroughs have selective or, well, no, actually, only 8 boroughs have neither selective or additional licensing schemes out of the 33. And of those 8, 4 are consulting currently on either introducing new or renewing previously existing schemes. So actually, the fact that boroughs are continuing...
Well, everybody likes money. It's about the additional powers that they have as a result of selective licensing.
Yes, and it's through selective licensing that boroughs can resource those teams in order to go out.
So it is about just money. It's not about power.
We've just been having this. We've just been having this conversation, about boroughs being resourced to be able to enforce, and I think the idea that money isn't important.
Yeah, I'm still trying to find out what additional power the boroughs have, but perhaps we'll move on because it seems quite murky. The response there, and it probably take a little more me asking exactly the same question in order to get to the bottom of it. How could the Mayor's rogue landlord and agent checker report a rogue landlord tool and property licence checker be improved to reflect the new measures in the Act? So what are the changes?
It is being improved. So the rogue landlord and agent checker is being updated to include new offences under the Act. The property licence checker is being updated to reflect the new and amended and improved rent repayment orders. So, yes, they are being updated in light of the new legislation.
Of course, some people can choose not to be on, to go under the scheme and not to register their home that they've let out. How are we going to chase up on them?
Sorry, can you clarify the question?
Well,
a landlord.
Yeah, a landlord. Let's take, for an example, somebody who isn't on the Rogue Landlord database. So, Jazz Athol, for example, could decide to let his place out, not go onto a selective licence scheme, not notify anyone that he is letting it out. How would an local authority deal with those in that hypothetical case?
Well, I mean, is this a question about who is on the database and who is on the checker and who isn't on the checker?
No, it's so far much. Yeah, it's who's on the checker, and you currently only record those people who've had fines or court action against them.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a consistent approach, Assembly Member Boff, and it applies to everybody equally. So
well,
not everybody. I mean,
not former leaders of Redbridge Council.
No. In many cases, enforcement does not get as far as a landlord ending up on the database, but it's entirely consistently applied without fear or favour, I will say.
Also, Assembly Member Boff, just to complete the answer to that question in terms of what happens, how would anybody know if a landlord chose not to register themselves with the PRS database? One of the points of the PRS database is that government assumes or expects the majority of landlords to register, which would then free up the resource. Borough officers spend a huge amount of time currently trying to find names, contact details, addresses of landlords and properties in their boroughs before they can even begin to do any of that enforcement work. And the PRS database will remove a whole set of people from that work because their details will be very easy to find. That will free up borough resource to concentrate on those who are determined not to be found in the way that you suggest.
I just wanted to follow up on the kind of beginning of this around the data that is and isn't available. So the rogue landlord and agent checker, doesn't the data only stay on it for a year? And isn't there quite a lot of information that isn't publicly available?
On the public tier, so when the checker was created, the legal advice that we received was that the public tier the data should only be accessible on the public tier for a year. However, it's still there on the private tier, which boroughs can access. I have asked the question subsequently.
That was going to be my next question.
I have asked the question as to whether or not, it remains the view of our legal advisors that a year is proportionate. And I'm going to continue to push on that point because, it might well be that looking at it again, it's possible for a different legal opinion. So it's definitely something that I'm committed to looking at again and reviewing. But as it stands, it is based on the legal advice that we received.
Great. And just in the session before, we heard about the My House Issue Gateway from the TDS group. I don't know how that interacts or is different to... or do you promote that as well? Yeah,
we really could do. And it was interesting to hear Jennifer talk about it. I've known of it, but I haven't played with it, and now I'm going to go away and have a play. But it's that sort of thing. I mean, the truth is that nobody comes to london.gov for kind of advice about kind of renting or other housing issues, and rightly so, because we're not advisors. But what we can do is point them in the direction of expert advice. And so we can certainly go away and have a look at, and we know that the general public is using our reporter rotor and our property licence checker and the rogue landlords and agent checker. And if we can use those as gateways to some of that additional advice, then we'll certainly look to do that.
Great. And that links on to our next question around communicating the measures in the Act. So on to
does indeed.
Member Baker.
Yes, that is under my question. So, Deputy Mayor first. So, the Mayor has indicated that he wants to help communicate out the rights, the new rights and measures that renters will have. And we heard in the previous panel how crucial that's going to be. Because if people don't know that they've got this rights, then effectively the implementation will just fall over. So what's the Mayor's plan and how is he going to coordinate that with any national campaign? Because obviously everyone has their part to play in this. I'll start with Deputy Mayor, but Vicky, if you want to come in, that'd be...
Yeah, really, really important point. It's absolutely vital that renters know their rights. So first of all, we're working through the partnership to encourage boroughs to work collectively on their communication strategies on this, but we're also going to be using the Mayor's channels to promote this as well. So we will be updating the previous renters' rights posters that ran on the TfL network, and we'll be putting out new ones in light of the changes. We'll also be using the Mayor's digital and social media channels to push this as well. I think there's a particularly interesting opportunity here, going back to what we were saying earlier about affordability, to promote rent tribunals now as an option for renters that they may well never have been aware of in the past.
Yeah. Vicky, do you have anything to add on that?
Tom's done a very good job, but there was reference made in the session just before about whether local authorities are still running kind of landlord forums or renters forums, and I can confirm that they are. They're very variable in how many renters turn up, no matter whether you do it in person over coffee or online. And boroughs are being very inventive in how they reach renters in their local areas, but it is a bit hit and miss. But from our last PRS partnership meeting, we know that boroughs are concerned that renters should be receiving this information. There's a question of timing. It's quite delicately balanced in that the most significant new rights for renters don't come in until the 1st of May, as you will know. But landlords can serve a Section 21 notice up until the last day in April. And so it's really important that renters don't think their rights have changed now, because they haven't. And so we know from conversations with Shelter, for example, that early messaging has been wildly misinterpreted. And AI has picked up all sorts of weird things and turned it into something that it isn't. And there is a really significant danger in renters thinking that their rights have changed when they haven't. So government is currently running a landlord awareness campaign, but is delaying their renters awareness campaign until, I think it's April. To try and hit that sweet spot, and we'll be timing kind of our kind of communications with renters. And of course, when Tom was talking about the posters that you might have seen previously up on the TfL network, the primary audience is renters, but secondary audiences are very much about landlords and Londoners who have concerns or interests in the sector, who might have children or family members who are living in the private rent sector, or who are not yet renters but might be. And it's important that we kind of capture all of those groups.
Yeah, I mean, if we raise the awareness overall, as in the first panel, you know, some people were like, yes, I would take advice, I would go to my mum and dad. Well, if the mum and dad have got some idea, then at least we've got some chance. Yeah. So you're going to coordinate any London campaign with the start of any national campaign as well. Is that what? Am I
we're mindful
getting that right?
Of how that will work. My comms colleagues would tell me that we're constrained by all sorts of things as well. Availability of poster space apparently is one of them, which I just take advice on. But obviously our position is, let's try and get these as aligned as possible. And if we can't, let's be really careful in our messaging so that it's as clear as possible.
Chair, can I just add two things to that, please?
Yes, you can, yes.
Thanks. The MHCLG have said that when they launch the database, that will be preceded by a national publicity campaign to encourage landlords to go onto the database. And, you know, as has been said previously, that's a massive plus for local authorities to have that database. The other thing is that it's a legal requirement for all tenants when they start a tenancy to be given a government leaflet. In fact, it's a legal requirement anyway for existing tenants, so they'll have that information about their rights. But what it doesn't do is help tenants prior to a tenancy, because they won't have such information available.
Yeah, and so obviously there are some of those rights are actually when they're looking for a place, aren't they? But we also heard evidence that I can't remember, it was a guide to renting, apologies, I can't remember that. Yeah, there's not that much evidence that large numbers of renters either receive or remember receiving it. Obviously, we can't quite tell which one of those it is. So, and widening this out now, I'm not necessarily going to say whose responsibility it is, but what can actually be done to really significantly change the level of understanding and then the access that renters have to be able to enforce those rights. We talked a little bit about advice organisations, and obviously then we talked about the portal that was talked about in the first panel. You know, what are the biggest measures going to be? What could be done to make that step change? Whether or not I'm asking any of you specifically to do it, there's a different thing.
Just very quickly, there's a really nice analogy here. If we're talking like really imaginative step change positions, really we want the private renter sector to get to a position where it's as unacceptable to rent out property in poor condition or with other problems with the tenancy as it is to get in a car and not put your seatbelt on. I mean, that's massive, big picture behaviour change stuff. But really, that's where we need to get to. And in all the conversations about how we're going to support renters to be using their rights, which I'm absolutely bought into, and it's a government responsibility by and large because it's a national piece of legislation, although there are lots of things, as you've heard, that we can do in London. Really, I want to get to a position where renters aren't having to be at the forefront of this, that they will assume that it will be a backstop rather than their everyday kind of experience of renting. And that's where I want us to be able to get to. I'll be in work for a very long time, I suspect, as we kind of try and get towards that. But beyond, you know, we've heard from Tom kind of some of the more immediate actions that we can do, along with working with our kind of voluntary and community sector colleagues who can reach parts of the renter community that we wouldn't necessarily be able to reach, including kind of in language and presentation and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you made the comparison with like seatbelts. I mean, that required a level of, I suppose, shaming, it being unacceptable, and people going, I don't want to be friends with someone who would put their people in danger. I mean, is that really a step that I'm not saying it's a bad idea, to be honest, because I think it is totally unacceptable to be renting out a horrible home and expecting people to live in it and not taking responsibility for that. But is that really a step that you're going to take?
Well, it's part of what...
I'd like to see those posters on TfL. I'm not sure everyone would.
No, but it's part of what the Rogue Landlord and Agent Checker does already. So Londoners, or anyone, can go onto the Rogue Landlord and Agent Checker and see if their landlord or a prospective landlord or a landlord of a property that they know is rented.
It's still reasonably socially acceptable, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have more work to do.
Yeah. Is there anything else that can be done to coordinate the messaging, really? Because I'm hearing what these people do this, these people will do this, fine. But I'm not really hearing how it's going to be coordinated and, you know, how, you know, it's going, okay, this sector or this level of government is best placed to deliver these messages or anything like that. Considering how crucial it is for people to understand those rights that are very, very limited and making them absolute norms in society, I'm not quite hearing the level of joined up, you know, campaign and coordination.
I mean, it's joined up through the private renter sector partnership. We're joined up with the government on it. So, you know, and indeed, of course, we're coordinated with our civil society partners through, you know, the Mayor's funding of organisations, £11 million, for example, he's giving out to advice organisations. So, you know, I think we are quite joined up between ourselves, local government and national government. We want to push for more, of course. And, you know, I think it is, I think we absolutely have to be shouting about this to make sure that everybody is aware. I also think the national database actually is going to provide a real fantastic opportunity for boroughs to be able to hopefully communicate with their renters in a way that they perhaps haven't been able to before. Of course, boroughs with licensing schemes, have the addresses of all the private renter sector properties in their boroughs. They presumably can post stuff out and things like that. But I think there's a fantastic sort of London-wide, nationwide opportunity for boroughs to be able to communicate with their renters, including promoting their rights, than there ever has been before, potentially.
Thanks. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Just for a point of clarification, I know you said, Vicky, there's a number of things the comms team have to consider. Obviously, the key period for this being before the 1st of May falls in the pre-election period, which is something we've discussed as a committee. Is that an issue, or because we're kind of promoting rights, which shouldn't conflict with that?
My understanding, and I would need to... Right, yeah, my understanding is that no, there isn't a problem.
Because that would be a shame. Also, just I know you mentioned that the government are focusing on the kind of landlords at the moment. Do you know what's being done about overseas landlords, who obviously might not see stuff on the tube, but, obviously get their information in a different way? Is there any consideration being done for overseas landlords?
I don't know of anything specific about that. No, I've not had any conversation with MHCLG about that. It is going to be clearly a consideration. Someone must be collecting the rent in this country, presumably, but not necessarily so. They could be paying abroad, and I think that's one that we're going to have to explore further, because I don't know of any particular thing that's going to be aimed at overseas landlords.
Great. Sounds like something for us to look into. The next couple of questions are just from me, and they are about the commitment that the Mayor made in the 2024 manifesto to fund renters' unions. So, Tom, I wondered if that plan, is there still a plan to fund those groups, particularly in this moment of this implementation of the Renters' Rights Act?
It's certainly something I would like us to do. As you know, the GLA budget is under particular pressure at the moment. So at this stage, we've not been able to identify the funding in order to do that. I mean, I met London Renters Union very recently, just a few weeks ago. We discussed this, and I, explained the situation to them. It's still something that I would like us to do this mayoral term, but it's not something that we've identified funding for at this stage.
So when you say that you haven't identified it, are you going with an amount of money? Like, is it 20k, $1 million? Like, when you said there's not money identified, like, I don't know if you've had that discussion with the unions about the kind of scale of...
Well, I'm not going to be
any money would be helpful.
Specific about the scale of the funding, but at the moment, we don't, in the context of the current GLA budgetary pressures, we haven't identified funding at, I think, a scale that would be meaningful.
So it's something that's still on the table. And one of my questions was going to be, has the Mayor met with any of the groups? But I know that you've mentioned that you've met with London Renters Union. Are there plans?
I met with LRU, I met with Acorn in the autumn, I think it was, and I meet Generation Rent quite frequently.
And how do you and the Mayor plan to listen to renters groups and other renters representatives in this period and going forward?
Well, I think it's through the engagement that we do, as I say, through the meetings that we have. When I met with LRU, for example, we talked about having sort of quite a sort of semi-regular frequency of meetings. I'm certainly hoping to meet them again either before or during the pre-election period. So yes, I mean that's the main way in which we engage.
Brilliant. And do you know? This is something, that's come up in our previous discussions, that if the Mayor would consider funding kind of mystery shopper agencies to help identify instances of non-compliance.
I have a feeling that is the sort of thing that some organisations, perhaps like Shelter Crisis, already do. I'm sure I have read in the press examples of this. So it might be that something that is already happening. Vicky, is it something you're aware of?
I know it has happened in the past, not necessarily around kind of private renting sector enforcement, but that kind of space. And obviously we take, so our renting organisation colleagues feedback to us frequently about things that they uncover or are concerned about in their particular areas. So kind of as well as the more formal kind of meeting type engagement, we're in regular contact and hear frequently about things that are problematic.
And just for my understanding around the funding that's been committed within this kind of period, it'll be towards the kind of comms approach rather than directly to the organisations for support, but you're going to keep talking to them about whether you can do that in the future.
Yes, absolutely. And as you say, as I've said, we are going to be using the Mayor's channels in order to promote this. We'll continue the conversation with renters' organisations around whether there's any further support that we can offer.
Good. I know I've been asking about this a lot because I think that obviously, providing this funding is really important in this moment, but it's good to hear that you're continuing the conversations with them. I think Assemblymember Lord Bailey wanted to come in this section.
Chair, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can't hear
quiet.
you.
Yeah.
I don't know what I can do about that. That's not on me. Can you hear me now?
No. I don't know what his question is. No, he's coming in for another question here. Yeah. Can we turn him up?
Yes, I'll ask them.
Okay, we're going to try and turn you up.
Of the two of them.
Chair, I don't have a supplementary. I was going to go to question 12.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, we did. Yeah, I thought you wanted to come in on this section. I could just ask the lead question while we try and turn your volume up, and then you can come in. Is that all right? So how will the Mayor and local authorities be able to monitor the impact of the Act? So this is Sean's
so we've covered some of this a bit in the sense that there's going to be these 50 new data points that local authorities are going to be required to report on. The team will also continue to monitor the other data sets that we monitor around things like evictions and things like that. So that should give us a picture of the impact of the Act in London.
Can I add to Tom's list? So as well as so we'll be kind of tracking trends and monitoring kind of key areas, including, as Tom said, whether there might, and we've referred to before, about whether there might be a spike in Section 21 or illegal evictions. And I'm not counting them as the same. They are different species in advance of the Act coming in proper on May the 1st. But also we'll be keeping a very careful watch on whether marginalised renters are being forced or further locked out of the market. We touched on the need for guarantors previously, pressures on local authority enforcement capacity, which we've talked about a lot this afternoon, awareness of rights. We know that renters don't know that they have rights, let alone what they are now. So this is a really great opportunity for that kind of information and education piece. Whether rent increases might still be used by landlords to unofficially force their tenants out of properties. We know that that renters currently, if told that their landlord is going to increase the rent to an amount that they can't afford, they just get up and go because they know they can't afford the rent. And the fact that it is very difficult to find a cheaper property if you move out of your tenancy and moving into a new tenancy is beside the point a bit. And you also touched in your earlier session about whether the rumours of landlords exiting the market in the face of the new legislation will actually come to pass and what impact that might have. So there's some of the broad things we'll be looking for. And we'll do that by continuing to work with our colleagues in advice and community settings who will be our eyes and ears on the ground. They will see the impacts first, using the partnership for that intelligence about enforcement and borough readiness generally and intelligence gathering, and working with boroughs, including kind of trading standards teams, MHCLG, our colleagues at Jigsaw and others, to increase that capacity for enforcement. And then also adapting kind of the GLA intermediate housing products, such as kind of London Living Rent and Key Worker Living Rent, which is coming on stream to the new tenancy regime. So there's some of the things that we'll be kind of looking out for in terms of trends and impacts.
I think it'd be also interesting to monitor what happens in terms of rent tribunals and things like that, because again, this is we're entering into a sort of new territory on that front. So it'll be very interesting to see what we see in that space as well.
And on that basis, our team is doing a piece of kind of benchmarking, I suppose, work to understand what those stats look like now for the private renter sector, so that we've got a baseline and that we can see kind of what happens to rents. And we'll not be gathering the data ourselves. We'll be using data sources that already exist, but so that we've got as complete a set as we can have of data that will help us to provide that kind of benchmark.
I think there's a case, Chair, for having agreeing a London-wide data set where there isn't a duty to report, because there's information that we might want to know which you won't get from the current data set. And one of the issues with a data set is it's just based on formal actions and it doesn't count informal actions. And that's just as important, because informal actions still achieve a goal. So I think there's a case for looking at where we've achieved what we want to achieve through informal actions, which won't be recorded on the data set. Some other things, for example, that I think are worth recording would be where breaches have occurred under Part 1 of the Act, where we don't feel we can action it anymore. So people have come and said things like, I think that I've been evicted under Section 8, now they've got tenants back in there 2 months later, and the local authority just cannot enforce it, they can't investigate. I think it's worth doing that, because MHCLG will need to know about these very difficult to enforce areas. I think it's worth recording the number of evictions that have been prevented, even though there's no enforcement action. That happens now, and I think that's important in the future as well. Another thing that's worth looking at is, with the abolition of Section 21, what we don't know is how many evictions were carried out under Section 21, because it's much more convenient than carrying it out under Section 8 for things like rent arrears or antisocial behaviour. So we don't know that. So just because Section 21 has gone, it doesn't mean that there's going to be a reduction in that amount of evictions. It may be that they just move over to Section 8 evictions. So we need to monitor whether or not Section 8 evictions have gone up proportionately to the amount that Section 21 has gone down. And finally, I think there is one more thing that Jigsaw is quite concerned with, which is the sham licences. So that happens now, and there's a potential when the database comes in to be expanded significantly. This is landlords setting up sham licences. For example, they're saying this is an Airbnb arrangement. It's not a tenancy. And actually it is a tenancy. And they use that in order to circumnavigate their responsibilities to, say, be registered on the database. It happens now with licensing schemes, but the database, which applies to all properties across the whole of England, it's on a completely different level. And I think there will be more temptation for landlords to just create sham licences in order to circumnavigate their responsibilities.
Assembly Member Lord Bailey, do you want to try and come in? No, I can't hear you at all now. Yeah, he could send it. He could send it. He could send it to Diane. Leave a voice note and we can play that out.
His microphone is on, so I don't know why.
Assembly Member Boff, do you want to ask a question in the meantime?
Yes, please. Was that me? No. Okay. About the data that's being captured, there was sound like a lot of data being captured. Are we going to capture the total number of PRS properties now and in the future?
We're not. Whether the PRS database will ever be in a position to do that, I'm not sure. Boroughs that have licensing schemes have a much better grip of how many PRS properties they have in their borough than boroughs that don't. It's a bit, I think we'll have a much better idea, well, we'll know for sure who has registered, so that will give us a really good start. The question about, Christine previously talked about that bottom third, and landlords, some of whose landlords are absolutely determined not to be found.
Yes.
That will be more difficult. But what the databases, I think I said before, will do is free up resource to enable boroughs to concentrate their resource on finding.
You're saying that we're operating in a vacuum of not really knowing how many PRS properties there are?
Can I just... I think in some of this, well, a picture is created by the National Housing Survey, isn't it? In the sense that it's not going to give you the exact number, but it should... It doesn't give you
There's no such
indication.
thing as an exact number in our business, is there? But
no, there's not. And the houses move in and out of private
any
rental all the
data
time.
you've got to give a little bit of leeway to, and I understand that. But it's in order to see what the impact of this policy is going to be, because Professor Whitehead earlier said she's pretty sure that it's not going to result in an increase of PRS properties. So we want to monitor the impact of that.
Absolutely. I mean, there is some data that can give an indication, and the latest data on buy-to-let mortgages, for instance, the latest data we have it's just been published is for Q3 last year. That actually showed quite a big increase in the proportion of buy-to-let mortgages that were issued compared to the same period last year. It was up 23% nationally. And just over 3% in London. So, given that landlords are potential landlords are very, very aware that the Renters' Rights Act is coming into force, it doesn't perhaps paint the picture of that things are getting worse. In fact, it shows that the number of buy-to-let mortgages is increasing. So it's not perhaps the picture that has been painted.
Yeah, but I'm just talking
about... But my point,
I'm not talking about...
My point, sorry,
conclusions you draw.
Is that data will be... that data is published every quarter, so that will offer some indication.
Well, if you're struggling, the London Assembly's Planning Committee requested a sort of a snapshot of London at the moment, and the different typologies, different number of rooms, that might be a good start, because it is important that we monitor the effects of this policy on the site.
I agree, and I think Vicky has set out quite a comprehensive set of ways in which we'll be doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's a bit better.
A bit better.
Yes. Computer wizardry back here. I just want to ask a question about the effects of this policy, because if you're listening to this conversation, as I have been, it sounds like landlords are terrible and it's going to be an absolute tidal wave into court. So is that correct? Is this going to have a massive effect on court? Are lots of tenants going to be lined up in court taking their landlord, or is it just a slight rise we're looking at?
Difficult question to answer. I mean, I think we've already covered during the session the fact that we need to make sure that courts are resourced properly in order to deal with any of the impacts of this. I don't know that we've got a sort of prediction as to how many more court cases there might be as a result.
No, and I think to go back to the beginning of your question, it's not... We know that most landlords are at least trying to do the right thing. And so it's easy to kind of fall into a trap where we're talking about landlords as if they're all going to be subject to enforcement action. And that's simply not the case. But what the system must do is protect renters when they do find themselves in situations where their landlords are not keeping their property in good condition, or otherwise creating the conditions for a good and stable tenancy. I don't think there is a prediction. I can go away and have a look about what the impact on courts will be. Obviously, the Act provides renters with a clearer and safer route to challenging egregious rent increases than they have had previously. But as we've talked about so much this afternoon, we know that renters, one, very few really understand the rights that they have, and two, they live busy lives, and their ability to chase something through what is still quite a complex and daunting court system will be really limited. So there's a little bit, I think, of we'll just have to wait and see. But certainly there are more doors open to renters to do that, and it's really important for both renters and landlords that the court can respond appropriately.
I suppose, thank you for that, Vicky. I suppose the success of this policy will be measured by how many renters don't have to go to court. Going to court against any kind of company for an individual is an absolute nightmare. And on a personal level, I'd argue you should avoid at all costs. But hopefully the development of this will mean that many more landlords just understand what they should be doing and everybody doesn't end up in court. So maybe I'm asking this to Vicky and Peter. What KPIs should the mayor be looking at to understand the impact of this in London in particular? Is there a magic set of stats we need to look at, or is it just about speaking to as many landlords and tenants as possible, or a combination of the two? But what should we be looking at along the way as this new culture develops to this new set of rules?
I'll come in with one and then I'll pass it on the line. I mean, I think for me a key one is reducing the number of people that are made homeless. I mean, that surely has to be, top of the list, but I'll go down the line.
Yeah, that absolutely, I agree with that, and also some of the things I've just said. So, for example, the data returns only look at formal action. I think we need to look at informal actions that have achieved the goal that we want to achieve. And some of the other ones around monitoring how many Section 21s have actually ended up as Section 8, because if it's the same number, then that suggests actually that's not a particular benefit for the Act. So that's something that I would want to monitor.
And the only thing I'll add to that is, because I can't help myself, is that the mayor isn't in a position to be setting any KPIs, because the boroughs are responsible for inspecting and enforcing, and the mayor is able to use his convening powers to bring boroughs together to share that expertise and intelligence, and support boroughs really to be constructing their own KPIs.
Thank you for those answers. Of course, Vicky, you're correct, but you sit in a team where the deputy mayor claimed that you've got everything almost that you've pushed for. So if the mayor has been so instrumental in pushing for these things, you should at least be paying attention to the outcome. So
I'm going to push back on that slightly, Assemblymember Bailey, because the KPI there is, has the mayor been successful in getting the things that we have lobbied for into legislation? But the actual given that the GLA doesn't have the requisite powers, I think it's stretching it a bit far to say the mayor needs a KPI for stuff that he can't enforce against. So I do think that needs to sit elsewhere and probably Tom, with the boroughs.
Actually, Tom, that's not what I said. What I said was the mayor has been very busy saying that he pushed for these things. He can't just push things out into the universe and leave them to it. He has to have some interest on what effect they may have, good or ill. So that's
and of course, we haven't done that, and I think we've been through the ways in which the mayor adds value through things like the private rented sector partnership and the checkers and things like that, in order to help to improve the system. But ultimately, accountability for enforcement and things like that does sit elsewhere. We do everything that we can to improve the system, to make it work better, to improve coordination. But ultimately, that's a convening role and it's a lobbying role.
Chair, I think that's it from me.
Great, and it was good we were able to hear you in the end. Assemblymember Boff.
I imagine this is the last knockings, isn't it? The last question.
Last question, yeah.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, do you regret that Keir Starmer won't be able to use the Renters' Rights Act when he's made homeless in a few days?
Sorry, is that a serious question?
This is taking a turn.
It's always fun. Look,
I think we should.
No.
Tom's gonna...
It's always fun to end on a light note, but I presume that's not a question from the briefing, Chair.
No. Nobody worked on that.
No, it's not one of our questions.
You've been looking forward to that one, have you?
Immensely.
Okay, I think we are coming to an end. I'd like to thank the panel immensely for your contributions. It's been really, really insightful. And I look forward to kind of bringing this together. So thank you for your time and your contributions. Committee, can we note the report in today's discussion? You also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group leads to agree any output arising from the discussion?
Agreed.
Can we note the committee's work programme?
Noted.
The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for the 12th of March 2026 at 2 p.m. in the chamber. I have no urgent business and declare the meeting to be closed.
This is the broadcast from City